Hi, I'm Cameron Bonzi. I'm the Vice President of Marketing with Coast of Maine Brands, and welcome to the Growing Good podcast. I'm here with Resh Gala. And Resh, we were talking, you and I have known each other for we're not sure how long, but Coast of Maine has been working with you for the last several years. You've got over 200,000 Instagram followers, and you have a new book, and it's called Vegetable Gardening Made Easy, Simple Tips and Tricks to Grow Your Best Garden Ever. So we're going to talk a little bit about this. And how did you originally get inspired to start gardening?
Thank you so much for the introduction. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
So I think, I started gardening, I would say about 6, 7 years ago. And just on a whim, like most people in spring, you're walking past these big box retailers and your garden centers, and you see these, beautiful plants laid out there of all these different varieties of vegetables. And you just feel like, you know what, let me just pick one up, bring it home, and, I'll get some tomatoes. And so that's, I'm just an ordinary gardener, didn't know anything about gardening, about growing food. And I just happened to pick up two tomato plants, brought them home, didn't even take them out of their little pots and put them in large containers, put them in my shaded patio, literally barely ever watered them. And obviously nothing grew. So, that was like the first start to my gardening journey was failure to grow tomatoes. And I was quite frankly really shocked that coming from Jersey, the garden state, the state of Rutgers tomatoes and, Jersey tomatoes and things like that. I'm like, how can I not be able to grow them? How can it be so hard? And so that led me down, this Alice in Wonderland rabbit hole, whatever you call it, of, exploration and learning. And that has sort of been my journey going from, zero tomatoes to now my company is called 100 Tomatoes. And it's about, not giving up. And I think a lot of gardeners, when they start gardening and they don't find success, they just say, oh, I have a brown thumb, I don't have a green thumb, and they just
Sure.
give up and they say, forget about it, this isn't for me. And I think as with anything else in life, first time you do anything, it's always going to be the steepest learning curve. And, we should accept that. But by not giving up and staying consistent and just, to keep trying is when then you find success and you find the rainbow at the end. So I say don't give up, and I'm a testament to that.
Well, you certainly don't give up and actually looking at the gardens that you've created for yourself and others, it's pretty magnificent. They're beautifully shot. They certainly come across as abundant. But one of the things that I was noticing at the beginning when you were talking about your first experience, you did talk about the soil and the pests that you had, that you learned a little bit about healthy soil, pests, and plants. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Oh, absolutely. So, the first time, like I said, I got those two tomato plants home. They didn't grow. So then the following year, I actually hired a landscaper to build me four really small raised beds, literally 2 feet by 3 feet. And I was like, okay, he's the expert, and therefore now I'll have an easier time. But often landscapers, they might know about your shrubs and bushes and mulching your garden, but they don't really know much about the soil health, or about vegetable gardening, for example. So what happened is that he filled my raised beds with the, I think, construction quality soil is what I'd like to say, maybe from a construction site, because it was like dry, it was dusty, it had rocks in them. And after I did my research, I realized this is the wrong soil, because whatever I planted in them that year, I had so much of expectation, put in tomatoes, zucchini, all that. And literally, again, nothing grew. All the pests came in, to attack my plants. And my kids and my husband would be like, Mom, you're spending hours in the garden checking every leaf, um, and just constantly spraying them with like water and what neem oil and whatever I was researching online. And so it was definitely a frustrating experience, but at least that taught me two things I learned from that. One is the importance of healthy soil, and the second thing was that I could recognize pretty much a lot of pests in the garden. I don't say all the pests, because I don't think we've discovered them all. but I could recognize a lot of pests in the garden, in the vegetable garden. So those were the two things. And so when I had that experience with the soil and this failure for a second time, I researched as much as I could, and I came to the conclusion that soil was so important. And so that led me to actually start composting. So I bought my first Yimby composter for $99 on Amazon. And I got myself one of those, containers, those pails to keep on my kitchen sink. And I started, adding all that stuff. And the first, so I threw out the old soil, put in fresh new soil, added the homemade compost that I had, and then put in the plants. And I'm not joking, it was like a day and night. Like the shift was phenomenal, I would say. And from that point, it was like success. It was just an upward trajectory. So soil is like super important. The quality of soil, what you put in it, because ultimately, I think a lot of us just think of food as just something you pluck from a plant and then you consume it. But that vegetable or fruit, whatever you're eating, it's pulling the nutrients from somewhere. And that's really the soil and the atmosphere. So it's very important that we start with a healthy foundation.
It
So,
was really interesting for me. So I didn't grow up as a gardener. I ended up helping a friend produce a gardening show. That's how I learned things. I'm terrible at recognizing plants, honestly. Don't ask me about the plants behind me. I just have this, disability in that way. But what I noticed when I first started working at Costa Maine and started going out talking to garden center owners and also perhaps landscapers, that what you said originally about knowing how to build something, getting you the right plants, but not understanding soil and the
mm,
foundation and the base was common.
yeah,
I could speak to what was in the soil, not as well about the plants, and there's been a shift and a change over time with that. And people do understand that healthy soil does lead to healthy plants, fewer pests,
yep.
uh, better tasting, more beauty. So it's awesome. And then your determination. So that's I'm big on, when you're raising kids, you want your kids to have determination, right? Stick-to-itiveness, and you want them to find their place. And you seem to have found your place. It's an amazing thing to me. So you have helped with this guide when you talk about just setting up your garden. I think that it's chapter 1, you talk about design and plan the garden. So when you're out there, where do you start with that? Somebody who's watching this, I'm more interested, honestly, in somebody who's just started gardening so you can inspire somebody. So where do you start?
Absolutely. So if you're a beginner, you don't have, any experience, I think the first place to start is by observing your space, your backyard or front yard, because the most important thing for plants or for anything, to thrive really and produce well is really sunlight. And then I would say water. So those are the two, key factors. So you need to first observe your space and find the spot that gets the maximum amount of sunlight, especially if you want to grow, fruiting crops and vegetables, your tomatoes, cucumbers that form flowers and fruits. So it's essential to find a spot that has maximum sunlight. Then you don't want it to be, far away from your home and really, somewhere where you have to, how you're going to water it and drag your hose pipe or figure out your drip lines, all the way far. So you need to also make sure the garden has easy access to water. So find your source of water, your water spout or your sprinkler system. That's the closest. And then third thing is, I'm a big proponent that out of sight is out of mind, right? So you don't want your garden to be far away in the middle of your, 1 acre property, somewhere really inaccessible. But when it's close to your home, close to your kitchen, close to your doorway, for example, that you access, your garage or whatever it is, that you tend to see it. You can, step basically in the morning, if you peek out of the window, you should be able to see your garden, see what's growing, so that, when you're cooking and you need some herbs, you need some tomatoes or whatever it is, you can just head out quickly, grab a few things and then use it. Because when it's far away, it's hard to actually go out there, make the effort, and then actually use it in your cooking and in your daily life. So definitely sunlight, water, accessibility, those are the three things. So you start from, observing these three, main key ingredients, and then selecting a spot for your garden. And once you've selected that location, that this is a spot that I'm going to go and build my garden, then comes the next step, which is, measuring everything out and figuring out the layout of your raised beds if you want to grow that way. And then once you have your raised beds, your layout figure out, then you need to also figure out what you're going to plant in them. So, you have to go step by step, a garden layout, and then planting plants would be the second.
And you also mentioned in here, and well, one thing that came to my mind when you were talking, because especially this time of year at Costa Maine, we work long hours. We may not be as good a gardeners as people think we are, because we're trying to get good soil out to different places. But when you come home at night, and there's always when you have a task to do, or you're looking at something, do you ever look at your garden and go, oh, or does it just inspire you to go, oh, I got to do some weeding, or I've got to clean this up, or I've got to harvest this? How does it impact you?
I think it just creates so much joy for me every morning. I think I've almost created this habit where every morning, first thing I wake up, I have 2 glasses of water, head to the gym, maybe drop my kids, head to the gym, do that. And when I come back, the first thing I would do is step into my garden and just take a look. And early in the morning, you have the birds chirping, there's a stillness and coolness, around you, and you head in there and you see what's growing, the sun is rising. It just feels so good, it's so therapeutic mentally. So I feel actually really uh, relaxed and happy and excited when I see my garden, and it just gives you hope because you see the possibility of what's growing in nature. Just right now, like this morning, I stepped into my garden and I posted about it on Instagram today. I'm amazed that some of the plants, and I'm in New Jersey, we got a foot of snow, I would say a couple of weeks ago. In like late February, we got a foot of snow, like Feb 23rd, if I'm not mistaken. And what is amazing is that some of the plants that I planted in fall of last year,
Yeah.
the broccoli, cabbages, cilantro, kale, mustards. Normally, people would think that, everything is dead right now because when you look outside, the trees don't have any leaves. But I've been using season extension techniques and growing, undercover in my raised beds in
Yeah.
my backyard. And this morning, I stepped outside into my garden, and it just gave me so much hope to see heads of broccoli form on the plants that I had planted in fall last year. And I was just noticing the kale that I had started from seed on August 8th. And I'm like, people are like now starting their seedlings, but you can actually enjoy so much food if you just invest a little bit of time and energy. And it doesn't take, like, you don't have to spend hours. Like, I haven't even planted a single seedling in my garden yet, but something that I did in August, I can still enjoy the harvest of that hard work right now in March without really having to go in and do anything else. So it's just about having a garden centered life and just putting in that little bit of time and effort. It's consistency as well, so it can give you big results.
Well, it's interesting too, because we were in looking at your book and also talking about cold weather crops and frost dates. I mean,
Mhm.
as we come into the season, you're pointing out know your frost dates. So talk to that a little bit too.
Absolutely. I think the most important thing for success, apart from soil, of course, is also to plant seasonally. So when you plant cool season veggies in the cooler seasons of spring and fall, they will thrive and they'll taste the best. When you plant summer crops, right after your last frost date, they will thrive and grow the best. If you plant a tomato outside right now, it will 100% die because it's too cold for it to survive. So
Right.
warm season and cool season crops, you have to know which ones they are. And so I categorize those in the book. And so it's just, to know your frost date, if you're a beginner out there, it's just really simple. You go on to Google, any search engine, and search last frost date for, and put in your zip code. And there are a lot of resources. I think Old Farmer's Almanac is
Yes.
one,
Yeah.
and it'll just show you your average last and first frost date. Now, typically, a lot of gardening centers, have made us believe that our growing season is what they call it, is between our last frost date, um, and then our first frost date, which is, typically for me, my last frost date is like May 10th. and my first frost date is October 15th.
Yeah.
So the nurseries and gardening centers, they make you believe that you can just grow. Your growing season is between May and October for me, but there's such a wide variety of things that you can actually grow. It is insane. So if you plant cool season veggies, spinach and kale, bok choy, lettuce, they can actually survive even when it's, below freezing. Um, and so once you know your seasons and you know your frost dates and you grow according to, that, it becomes so easy and natural. So I now grow carrots exclusively in fall because I just feel that frost and the cool weather tends to make them taste so much sweeter. So
That's awesome.
thank you.
No, in this, coming into spring, and yes, there are at least two seasons. We know everything is extended. And the other piece that I will say, the education of kids understanding that you can literally garden year round with some help depending on where you live. That is an amazing thing. But as coming into the spring and you're going to be looking more at tomatoes that are going to need the warm weather. That's kind of the setup that your book talks about at the beginning. And you talk in here growing according to the season, which you started to talk about a little bit in earlier. Talk to a little bit about growing to the season.
So growing to the season is, when you know your frost dates, I guess there are a lot of cold hardy veggies, and a few examples of those are lettuce, kale, bok choy, mustards, spinach, cabbage, broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, leeks, just to name a few. And these can be planted in spring and in fall. And the ideal time that when you're thinking about planning your garden and growing according to the season, one of the things that as a small space gardener, which I consider myself to be, one of the things you have to understand is number one, you want to plant these crops in the right season, like in spring, for example, the ones that I mentioned. However, you also want to be aware of how much time they take to grow. Something like radish or a lettuce can easily be harvested in, say, between 35 to 45 days, whereas something like broccoli or a cabbage can easily take between, 80 to 90 days, before you can harvest it. So if you plant a broccoli, just be aware that it might overlap a little bit with your warm season, which is fine, but you'll be harvesting your broccoli and your cabbages and your cauliflowers probably in June, but you'll be planting your tomatoes in May, which is
Right.
about right on your frost date. So, summer veggies. So I mentioned a few of the cool season crops. A few of the warm season crops, of course, are your tomatoes, basil, cucumbers, eggplants, peppers, your melons, squashes, zucchini, things like that, corn as well. So a lot of those should be planted and grow best in the warm season, because when it gets too cold, then those tend to die. And what happens vice versa is when you have your cool season crops like your lettuces and your kale, when it gets too hot, they tend to, grow really tall, send out flowers, and, taste really bitter. So, just plant everything according to the season. And I think I have a chart as well in my book, which tells you which are the right crops for each season. And that's when you have the maximum success, because I think success is what is success? It's defined differently for different people.
Right.
It also means that you not just harvest the food that you're growing, but you actually enjoy eating it. It should taste delicious. It should taste better than the grocery store stuff, right?
Well, it does, and I know people that garden almost they won't even part of the time buy from a grocery store because they say it just tastes so much different, and it does.
Yeah.
The you also talk in here about choosing award-winning varieties, ones that are more likely to have success, and speak to that a little bit now. The All-American selections, as you mentioned in your book.
Yeah, so All America Selection, it's like a nonprofit organization, and they create like this database of varieties of different edible plants and even, other things as well. But they create a database, and each year they come out with a list where they say these are the varieties of, say, your tomatoes or your corn, your cucumbers, melons, etc., that will do the best, and that they have asked people, to do some research on that and grow them. it's not just the ones that taste the best, but the ones that are also productive, the most pest resistant. So those type of varieties. So if you're a beginner and say you want to grow a tomato and you don't know what variety to choose, I would recommend just going onto All America Selections website and seeing the list of, veggies that they have over there, or the varieties of tomatoes, and just picking one of those, just so you don't feel overwhelmed when you go to your garden centers and see all those different hundreds and thousands of packets of seeds. And you're like, okay, now which one do I choose? Because gardening should be fun. It should not be overwhelming. So this is a great place to start, is having somebody who's already, experienced it before, or, who's got experience with this, as well as, places like All America Selection. It makes it easy for you, so you don't have to do the hard work.
It's the overwhelming part. I think it's very easy to get overwhelmed.
Yeah.
So you, at some point in your book, you mentioned about that, potentially getting overwhelmed and keeping it simple. And I think the part of this podcast is really about trying,
Yes.
experimenting, and bring out the best in yourself, in a sense. So that's kind of the message that I'm getting.
100%, 100%. And I think that's what gardening is. I mean, it's a part of nature, right? When you're growing food, we're growing plants. Um, eh, it's part of nature, and nature, everything doesn't grow perfect. It's not
Right.
100% all the time. And sometimes, we succeed and sometimes we fail. And even though, we have the best intentions, nature has its own, plans. So I think the lesson is, at the end of the day, be it gardening or be it life, I think you just, have the right intentions, you put in the work, and just try your best, and everything then, falls into place, and you win some and you lose some. And so you grow a variety of food, and sometimes you might be able to get a good harvest of lettuce, but may not have the best radishes, and that's okay. It's a balance, and that's how nature works. So we should be totally humble about it, and not feel like, oh my gosh, this is an X against me. Not at all.
Well, we can tell that you have the right intentions. Your content is great. Your book, do you want to tell people the best place? Is it Amazon? Where should people be looking for your book?
Yes. So my book is available on Amazon, as well as at Barnes& and Nobles, at Target, at Walmart, at Indigo as well, if there's some Canadian listeners as well, and at bookshop.org. So these are all the different places that you can find my book. And I hope you do, get it, because it's awesome. It's got simple, easy tips. And yeah, one of my favorite, especially for this time of the year, is on page 36, 37, the seed sowing chart. So, if you don't know, you want to grow something from seed, and you don't know how to do, when to plant, what
There
to
it
do,
is.
this is like
Yeah.
makes it so easy. So, no matter where you live. So you just need to know your frost dates.
All right. So I have got this. I want to thank you for coming on. I also want to say another place where they can get your book is if you go to Coast of Maine Organic, that you can find that on Instagram and Facebook. We're actually giving away your book and some of our soil. So, and for us, it's important that you go to your local garden center. We believe in community, and we believe that buying local helps create a community. Thank you for coming on, and I hope you join us again.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it, and love Coast of Maine and their soil. Been using it for many years. So thank you.